Alright, here we are with the next part of the much anticipated Steppenwolf by Hermen Hesse. This is for Madmen Only. The day had gone by, just as days go by. I had killed it in accordance with my primitive and retiring way of life. I had worked for an hour or two and perused the pages of old books. I had had pains for 2 hours, as elderly people do. I had taken a powder and been very glad when the pains consented to disappear. I had laid in a hot bath and absorbed in its kindly warmth. 3 times the mail had come with undesired letters and circulars to look through. I had done my breathing exercises, but found it convenient today to omit the thought exercises. I had been for an hour's walk and seen the loveliest feathery cloud patterns penciled against the sky. That was very delightful. So was the reading of the old books. So was the lying in the warm bath. But, taken all in all, it had not been exactly a day of rapture. No, it had not even been a day brightened with happiness and joy. Rather, it had been just one of those days which for a long while now had fallen to my lot. To moderately pleasant, the wholly bearable and tolerable, lukewarm days of a discontented middle-aged man. Days without special pains, without special cares, without particular worry, without despair. Days when I calmly wonder, objectively and fearlessly, whether it isn't time to follow the example of Adalbert Stifter and have an accident while shaving. He who has known the other days, the angry ones of gout attacks, or those with that wicked headache rooted behind the eyeballs that casts a spell on every nerve of eye and ear, with a fiendish delight in torture, or soul-destroying, evil days of inward vacancy and despair, when, on this distracted earth, sucked dry by the vampires of finance, the world of men and of so-called culture grins back at us with the lying, vulgar, brazen glamour of a fair and dogs us with the persistence of an emetic. And when all is concentrated and focused to the last pitch of the intolerable upon your own sick self, he who has known these days of hell may be content indeed with normal half-and-half days like today. Thankfully, you sit by the warm stove. Thankfully, you assure yourself as you read your morning paper that another day has come and no war broken out. No new dictatorship has been set up. No particularly disgusting scandal been unveiled in the worlds of politics or finance. Thankfully, you tune the strings of your moldering lyre to a moderated, to a passably joyful, nay, to an even delighted psalm of thanksgiving, and with it bore your quiet, flabby, and slightly stupefying half-and-half God of contentment. And in the thick, warm air of a boredom and very welcome painlessness, the nodding mandarin of a half-and-half god and the nodding middle-aged gentleman who sings his muffled song look as like each other as two peas. That sounds backwards, but that's the way he said it. That was nice. There is much to be said for contentment and painlessness, for these bearable and submissive days, on which neither pain nor pleasure is audible. Damn. I almost coughed mid-line and I stopped it, but phew. For these bearable and submissive days, on which neither pain nor pleasure is audible, but pass by whispering and on tiptoe. But the worst of it is that it is just the contentment that I cannot endure. After a short time, it fills me with irrepressible hatred and nausea. In desperation, I have to escape and throw myself on the road to pleasure, or, if that cannot be, on the road to pain. When I have neither pleasure nor pain, and have been breathing for a while the lukewarm, insipid air of these so-called good and tolerable days, I feel so bad in my childish soul that I smash my moldering lyre of thanksgiving in the face of the slumbering god of contentment, and would rather feel the very devil burn in me than this warmth of a well-heated room. A wild longing for strong emotions and sensations seethes in me, a rage against this toneless, flat, normal, and sterile life. I have a mad impulse to smash something, a warehouse perhaps, or a cathedral, or myself, to commit outrages, to pull off the wigs of a few revered idols, to provide a few rebellious schoolboys with the longed-for ticket to Hamburg, or to stand one or two representatives of the established order on their heads. For what I always hated and detested and cursed above all things was this contentment, this healthiness and comfort, this carefully preserved optimism of the middle class, this fat and preposterous brood of mediocrity. It was in such a mood, then, that I finished this not intolerable and very ordinary day as dusk set in. I did not end it in a manner becoming a rather ailing man, and go to bed tempted by a hot water bottle. Instead, I put on my shoes ill-humoredly, discontented and disgusted with the little work I had done, and went out into the dark and foggy streets to drink what men, according to an old convention, call a glass of wine, at the sign of the steel helmet. So I went down the stairs from my room in the attic, those difficult stairs of this alien world, those thoroughly burgess, well-swept and scoured stairs of a very respectable three-family apartment house, under whose roof I have my refuge. I don't know how it comes about, but I, the homeless Steppenwolf, the solitary, the hater of life's petty conventions, always take up my quarters in just such houses as this. It is an old weakness of mine. I live neither in palatial houses nor in those of the humble poor, but instead, and deliberately, in these respectable and wearisome and spotless middle-class homes, which smell of turpentine and soap, and where there is a panic if you bang the door or come in with dirty shoes. The love of this atmosphere comes, no doubt, from the days of my childhood. And a secret yearning I have for something home-like drives me, though with little hope to follow the same old stupid road. Then again, I like the contrast between lonely, loveless, hunted, and thoroughly disorderly existence, and this middle-class family life. I like to breathe in on the stairs this odor of quiet and order, of cleanliness and respectable domesticity. There is something in it that touches me in spite of my hatred for all that it stands for. I like to step across the threshold of my room where all this suddenly stops, where, instead, cigar ash and wine bottles lie among the heaped-up books, and there is nothing but disorder and neglect, and where everything, books, manuscript, thoughts, is marked and saturated with the plight of lonely men, with the problem of existence, and with the yearning after a new orientation of an age that has lost its bearings. Hermen Hesse's words, not mine. Anyway. And now, I came to the Arcaria. I must tell you that on the first floor of this house, the stairs pass by a little vestibule at the entrance to a flat, which, I am convinced, is even more spotlessly swept and garnished than the others. For this little vestibule shines with a superhuman housewifery. It is a little temple of order. On the parquet floor, where it seems desecration to tread, are two elegant stands, and on each a large pot. In the one grows an azalea, in the other a stately arcaria, a thriving, straight-grown baby tree, a perfect specimen, which to the last needle of the topmost twig reflects the pride of frequent ablutions. I have no idea what the fuck that means. Sometimes, when I know that I am unobserved, I use this place as a temple. I take my seat on a step of the stairs above the Arcaria, and, resting a while with my folded hands, I contemplate this little garden of order, and let the touching air it has, and its somewhat ridiculous loneliness, move me to the depths of my soul. I imagine, behind this vestibule, in the sacred shadow, one may say, of the Arcaria, a home full of shining mahogany, and a little, life full of sound respectability. Early rising, attention to duty, restrained but cheerful family gatherings. That sounds like fiction. Sunday church going early to bed, affecting lightheartedness. I trod the moist pavement of the narrow streets, as though in tears, and veiled the lamps glimmered through the chill gloom, and sucked their reflections slowly from the wet ground. The forgotten years of my youth came back to me. How I used to love the dark, sad evenings of late autumn and winter. How eagerly I imbibed their moods of loneliness and melancholy when wrapped in my cloak. I strode for half the night through rain and storm, through the leafless winter landscape. Lonely enough then, too, but full of deep joy, and full of poetry, which later I wrote down by candlelight, sitting on the edge of my bed. How else can you write poetry, am I right? All that was past now. The cup was emptied and would never be filled again. Was that a matter of regret? No, I did not regret the past. My regret was for the present day, for all the countless hours, days that I lost in the mere passivity. And that brought me nothing, not even the shocks of awakening. We need a pacifier for the dog. Hold on. Hey. You just woke our baby up, you piece of shit. Okay, hold on, I'm coming back. I can't remember where I stopped. Dang. I'm just going to start over right here. It's close. My regret was for the present day, and for all the countless hours and days that I lost in mere passivity, and that brought me nothing, not even the shocks of awakening. But thank God there were exceptions. There were, now and then, though rarely, the hours that brought the welcome shock, pulled down the walls, and brought me back again from my wanderings to the living heart of the world. I'm sorry about the very lived-in, non-middle-class house that I'm recording in. Anyway, sadly, and yet deeply moved, I set myself to recall the last of these experiences. It was at a concert of lovely old music. After 2 or 3 notes of the piano, the door was opened of a sudden to the other world. I sped through heaven and saw God at work. I suffered holy pains. I dropped on my defenses and was afraid of nothing in the world. Must have found himself some opium. Anyway, I accepted all things as they were. I gave up my heart. I did not last very long, a quarter of an hour perhaps, but it returned to me in a dream at night, and since, through all the barren days, I caught a glimpse of it now and then. Sometimes, for a minute or 2, I saw it clearly, threading my life like a divine and golden track. but nearly always it was blurred in dirt and dust. Then again, it gleamed out in golden sparks as though never to be lost again, and yet was soon quite lost once more. If that makes any sense at all, I would like an explanation. Once it happened, as I lay awake at night, that I suddenly spoke in verses so beautiful and strange that I did not venture to think of writing them down. And then, in the morning, they vanished. And yet, they lay hidden within me like the hard kernel within an old, brittle husk. Once, it came to me while reading a poet, while pondering a thought of Descartes or of Pascal. Again, it shone out and drove its gold track far into the sky while I was in the presence of my beloved. Ah, but it is hard to find this track of the divine in the midst of this life we lead, in this besotted, humdrum age of spiritual blindness, with its architecture, its business, its politics, its men. How could I fail to be a lone wolf and an uncouth hermit, as I did not share one of its aims nor understand one of its pleasures? I cannot remain for long in either theater or picture house. I can scarcely read a paper, seldom a modern book. He must have been reading YouTube video stories. Mm-hmm. I cannot understand what pleasures and joys they are that drive people to the overcrowded railways and hotels, into the packed cafes with the suffocating and oppressive music, to the bars and variety entertainments, to world exhibitions, to the Corsos. I cannot understand nor share these joys, though they are within my reach, for which thousands of others strive. On the other hand, what happens to me in my rare hours of joy, what for me is bliss and life and ecstasy and exultation, the world in general seeks at most in imagination. In life, it finds it quite absurd. I added a word there, but it made sense. And in fact, if the world is right, if the music of these cafes, these mass enjoyments, and these Americanized men who are pleased with so little are right, then I am wrong. I am crazy. I am, in truth, the Steppenwolf that I often call myself. That beast astray, who finds neither home nor joy nor nourishment in a world that is strange and incomprehensible to him. With these familiar thoughts, I went along the wet streets through one of the quietest and oldest quarters of the town. On the opposite side, there stood in the darkness an old stone, which I always noticed with pleasure. Old and serene, it stood between a little church and an old hospital, and often during the day I let my eyes rest on its rough surface. There were few such quiet and peaceful spaces in the center of the town, where from every square foot some lawyer or quack or doctor or barber or chirodontist, what is that, shouted his name at you. This time, too, the wall was peaceful and serene, and yet something was altered in it. I was amazed to see a small and pretty doorway, with a Gothic arch in the middle of the wall, for I could not make up my mind whether this doorway had always been there, or whether it had just been made. It looked old, without a doubt, very old. Apparently, this closed portal, with its door of blackened wood, had opened hundreds of years ago onto a sleepy convent yard, and did so still, even though the convent was no longer there. Probably I had seen it 100 times and simply not noticed it. Perhaps it had been painted afresh and caught my eye for that reason. I paused to examine it from where I stood. Without crossing over, as the street between was so deep with mud and water. From the sidewalk where I stood and looked across, it seemed to me, in the dim light, that a garland, or something gaily colored, was festooned round the doorway. And now that I looked more closely, I saw over the portal a bright shield, on which, it seemed to me, there was something written. I strained my eyes, and at last, in spite of the mud and puddles, went across, and there, over the door, I saw a stain showing up faintly on the gray-green of the wall. And over the stain, bright letters dancing and then disappearing, returning and vanishing once more. So, that's it, thought I. They've disfigured this good old wall with an electric sign. Meanwhile, I deciphered one or two of the letters as they appeared again for an instant, but they were hard to read, even by guesswork, for they came with very irregular spaces between them, and very faintly, and then abruptly they vanished. Whoever hoped for any results from a display like that was not very smart. He was a Steppenwolf, that poor fellow. Why have his letters playing on this old wall in the darkest alley of the old town on a wet night with not a soul passing by? And why were they so fleeting, so fitful, so illegible? But wait, at last, I succeeded in catching several words on end. They were Magic Theater, entrance not for everybody. I tried to open the door, but the heavy old latch would not stir. The display, too, was over. It was suddenly ceased, sadly convinced of its uselessness. I took a few steps back, landing deep in the mud, but no more letters came. The display was over. For a long time, I stood waiting in the mud, but in vain. Then, when I had given up and gone back to the alley, a few colored letters were dropped here and there. Reflected on the asphalt in front of me, I read, "For Madmen Only." Hold on, I'm going to check how much I've got to go, but I might stop there. It's 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm pretty sure that'll be another 30-minute section. Yeah, because I read 8 pages. That would be another 30-minute section. I'm going to call it for today. That was my my second video on trying to deliver the Steppenwolf from Hermen Hesse. It's not very well divided in chapters anyway, but this translation makes a lot more sense than some of the PDFs I'd found online. I got lucky to find this one in one of those little libraries on the side of the road. But that's it. That was Hermen Hesse. I'll see you next time. Next week, maybe.